Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to go through how you can use the new static items in DayZ on console and PC with something like the DayZ Editor in order to spawn in custom locations and custom objects and props on your custom community servers, again for PlayStation, Xbox and PC. So the trick for this, to do it easy, is to use the DayZ Editor, which is a PC mod. So unfortunately, you do need to own DayZ on PC, but you can pick it up in the sale or from a key site. And once you own that, you can then subscribe to the DayZ mod, to the DayZ Editor mod, along with Community Framework, Builder Items, and Dabs Framework. Download it all. And then you can fire it up. Now I'm going to show you how to do that, because this is going to be like almost like a complete walkthrough, to be honest. But I just want to kind of cover some of the foundations first. So we're going to be using PC DayZ with the DayZ Editor mod. A big mistake that people often make is that they forget to validate their XMLs and their JSON files as well when they've done some work. So whenever you've been fiddling around with your XML files, your .xml files or your .json files, make sure you use one of these sites. So jsonformatter.curiousconcept.com, I'll put links in the description below this video, or xmlvalidation.com, because it's very, very easy to make syntax errors when you're copy and pasting stuff around. So that's really important. The next thing is kind of the basics of how does this work? How does DayZ do this to spawn in custom objects? Well, what you need to make sure is that in your server, and I'm using Nitrado servers for example here, so this is a PlayStation server, you've got to make sure that in your general settings down the bottom you'll see enable cfg gameplay.json. You must have that enabled for any of this to work. If ever you do work and nothing seems to be happening, go back and double check that's ticked. Now on PC Nitrado servers, it's at the bottom as well. There it is. If you're using a local server or other server people, you may well have access to the DayZ server, the server config file, which is generally called serverdz.cfg. And if you have access to that, look out for that. So scroll around and you'll find it somewhere. It can go pretty much anywhere in the file. Enable cfg gameplay file equals 1. That must be there. If that's not there, and it's not in your here we go, you'll see it here in my one. There it is. Enable CFG gameplay file equals 1. Again, that won't activate the CFG gameplay file at 1. Now the CFG gameplay file needs to be activated because if we go have a look at the CFG gameplay.json file, there's a line in it here called the objectspawner array, and that's the line that calls the custom JSONs. So in this case, on my local server, I've got a custom JSON called maze.json. So it's a maze made out of containers. And so that's what calls that in. So you must have that in there as well. Now you may wonder, well, what's this custom bit? Well, on Xbox and PlayStation, the way that Nitrado, I guess the way that they manage our files is if you go into the file browser and then you go into your DayZ standalone, and then you go, oh sorry, that's my PC one, we don't want to go in there. File browser, PlayStation missions, DayZ offline Churnerus Plus, or it'd be Enoch for a Livonia server. We have this folder called custom. Now we don't put this there on PlayStation, Xbox. Nitrado put it there, and this is where we have to put in our custom JSON. So here's a few on my server. So .json. Now I would recommend, if you are working with a local server or you're working on a PC community servers, put your JSONs in a separate file. Make a custom folder and put them in there. So for example, this is on my local server. If we go into the missions, go into Churnerus, see there we go. I've got a custom folder for my custom JSONs. It just helps to keep them in one place so they don't get confused, because you end up with an awful lot of files in some of these directories, and so it can be difficult to to figure out, which is the custom JSON. So I would say do that, add that in. It also means that whenever you're watching my videos, because they tend to be aimed towards PlayStation and Xbox, I'll always be referring to things like object spawner array will always be custom / something, because that's the way we have to do it on Xbox and PlayStation. Okay, so the other thing is that when we create a custom JSON like maze.json, all that does, it just spawns the thing into the world. So we can spawn a house into the world, or we can spawn a tent into the world, but it doesn't add it to the loot economy of the game. So the bit that does is the map group pos.xml. So this is another file it's on your server. Basically it's in your missions folder. There it is, map group pos. There it is, just there. And that folder's this file is very, very important, because it tells DayZ.exe or DayZserver.exe where all the particular buildings are. So for example, the feed shack, it says, look, there's a feed shack at this position, at this orientation, and then the game will go, okay, what loot should we spawn in a feed shack? So it could be like a spade or a hammer or something like that, and it will spawn that in. So if you don't update your map group pos as well for structures you make using the DayZ editor, they won't have any loot in them that spawns naturally within the game. Now we can place loot around as an object, but the problem with that is that it's not included in the way that the game regularly works. So you don't want to be doing that too much. I can put excuse me, I can put an M16 rifle in a tent as part of the object, the custom object, but that will just be there, and if someone picks it up, it will disappear. But when the server restarts, it will just appear again. So it's not the best way of doing things. It can be a cool way of doing it, but you're not including things within the central economy. So they're kind of the basics that we've got to work through. So what we'll do now is, so I've downloaded DayZ Editor, so this is DayZ. So we could just go to mods, and we just make sure we load up DayZ Editor, and it will say, okay, you need Dabs Framework, Builder Items, and Community Framework. And all you do is you don't search for a server with DayZ Editor, you just hit play, because it's a local only mod. You don't install DayZ Editor on your community server. It just plays on your local PC, and it'll fire up, and then we can start the magic. I've got a bit of an error with the Xbox app at the moment that kind of pops up in a second, but for some reason it can't update itself. But we won't worry about that now, because it's not important. So let's open the editor. So it's going to be Chernarus. Enoch is Livonia. Dumpty 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 dum. As it goes through. Here we go. And if we go File, Open Recent, New Static Test. Here we go. So I've kind of started spawning things in. So what's different now is that on console you used to have to type land, and you could spawn things in that began with land, or if they were a regular everyday thing that was in the game, like a M16, you could drag it across, and we could put it in the game. So for example, if I where are we? I could go press spacebar to get your mouse back, type land, and I could put in a cement works, so over there. Alt goes up and down, Shift spins it around. There we go, and I could put that in there. And we could make some amazing structures, and people have done some really, really cool things using all the land items. But what it was missing was lots of the detritus, if you like, lots of the props that you would see in DayZ, such as piles of boxes, such as piles of tiles and pallets, such as a flag, such as a drill press, like you can see here. So all this stuff was kind of missing. So although we could do really cool stuff, you couldn't put in things like sandbags. So if we look in, let's have a look, barrier. Here we go. So things like these hex barriers just weren't available to us because they weren't under the land option. Right, let's just get rid of that bit. So tap some and press delete. So what they've done with the DayZ 118 update is not only do we have all the, if you just type in your search box land, always ignore the builder stuff. Builder is a PC mod. We can't use any of that stuff. But so now we've got all the land stuff. But what we've also got is thousands of static items. So we can now spawn these in on console. So it's all sorts. It's all sorts. I mean, there's a periodic table. I'm not quite sure what you would do with that in a. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough. In a tent. What we got? I guess we could put it up the back wall, couldn't we? Something like that. So for some reason... There we go. So we've got things like this. So we've got the periodic table that we can spawn inside this tent. So it's all this stuff that gives your custom locations more immersion, I guess, because you can really make them look like they were meant to be there at the beginning of the game, which is super impressive. And all you've got to do is you just drag something over from the left-hand side. You can zoom in and you can drag it down. If you press Alt, that makes it go up and down. Click and press Shift, you can spin it around. If you've got it selected, you can use the arrow keys to move it around. If you hold Shift, is it Shift? Yeah, if you hold down Alt, you can move it really, really slowly with the arrow keys or with the mouse, I think. Oh no, you can't. No, it's just mouse key. If you double click on the blue box, you can adjust the decimal points, so we could just play around with stuff, and you can adjust things like the pitch, roll and yaw to turn things over and do whatever you like. There's lots of videos out that show you how, the intricacies of using the DayZ Editor, but we can play stuff around. Now, so if we take this little scene for example, these objects here, these are just props, they're just furniture. They're not going to spawn anything or do anything in. So if we just wanted to spawn those in, we could just create a custom JSON file. I see that those tires are objects, but I'm using them as props. We could just spawn a custom JSON file. However, if you wanted this military tent to spawn items in, like it would in the real world, then we would have to make sure we create a map group pos item. Now, one thing that lots of people like to do, though, is they do like to use these custom JSONs to spawn in specific loot. So, for example, they'd like something like an org or a weapon or something to spawn in. See, that is a wrong item, isn't it? There we go. So they'd want to spawn in, say, an org. You can roll the mouse key as well and hold Shift to do it slowly. Okay. Press click somewhere and press T to put your character there, and press home so you can spawn in and you can have a look round. So there's whoop. Hey, stand up. Why are you lying down? Okay. So there we go. So we spawned a gun in. Now, it's important to remember that when you do spawn stuff in like this, is that it's not part of the ordinary loot economy of the server. The game is just treating it as a prop, just like any other prop around, like those boxes that are outside this tent. So when the server restarts, this will appear. If someone takes this, nothing will be there until the server restarts. Also, it won't have things like magazines on. You can't spawn in, for example, using this method, vehicles with all the wheels on and with stuff in the boot. It just doesn't work like that. You'd have to use that through CFG spawnable types and an event. Okay, so this is our little scene that we've created. So how do we get this onto our server? Well, there's two files we need to create. We need to create the custom JSON, and we need to create the map group pos snippet. So let's make the custom JSON first. So make sure you go File, Save As, and this one is, in fact I've already saved this one. Let's give it another name. So this is static test2, and this is just a .dze file, so it's a file that's read by the DayZ Editor. So now what we'll do is we want to go File, Export, and we want to export to objectspawner, so star.json. So we click on that, and then we scroll down, and in here we're going to call this Northeast Airfield Tent. Okay, so we're just going to click Export on that, and then we go File, Export, and we're going to export to map group pos, which is there, and we're going to call this Northeast Airfield Tent loot. Okay. So there we go. So we've created those two files now. So I can actually close down the editor. Like that. Let's shut this down. So the next thing is, well, where are these files? That's the question. Well, they'll be in your documents. So if we go to this PC, then you go into your documents folder, and then you'll find probably DayZ, and then editor, and it'll be down here. So if we scroll down, so here we go. So we've got Northeast Airfield Tent JSON and Northeast Airfield Tent Loot, which is the XML. Now what we want is we want to take that JSON, so I'm just going to copy that. And the way I'm going to show you this working is I'm going to show you on my local server. So now we're going to go back to my local server, which is here, and we're going to just pop that, and we're just going to paste it in there. So Northeast Airfield Tent JSON. If you're putting this on your live server, you would go to the custom folder on your server, and you would simply upload the file to there. Just remember, at the moment, even if we restarted, that file would not be activated. So the next thing we need to do is, if we want to activate it, we need to make sure that we change the object spawner array to have another line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put a comma in there, and we're going to copy that. In fact, I tell you what, before we go any further, I'm going to just double check that that is meant to be a comma, because I want to make sure I've got this right for you. CFG gameplay. Let's just check this one. I'm pretty sure it's a comma. Yeah, it's a comma. Right, that's one I've already done. So just put a comma there, and I'm just going to copy this. Again, this is another area where it's very, very easy to make spelling mistakes. So we've got two copies of the maze. Obviously, we don't want two copies of the maze. So what we're going to do is we go to custom, and we just want to left click on that, copy all of that, go back here, and put that in. So we've got our maze, and we've got our Northeast Airfield Tent.json. Well, let's just save that, and you would do exactly the same thing on the web in your CFG gameplay. You would just add that on. Another common mistake is that people put in the JSON file and they forget to put the custom bit in front of it, or they forget to put the little comma there, or they forget to have the comma at the end. Again, that's why you would use your validator. So the next thing we need to do, and this is the optional bit, this is the bit where we need to add in the map group pos snippet. So if we go back to my server, so if we open up the map group pos file here, so here's my map group pos. So if we just put some spaces in here at the top, and if we just go back to our editor file, so we had Northeast Airfield Tent Loot. Now if we edit with Notepad++, there's only going to be a few things here. So this has got a lot of stuff on it. You can see all the things that we spawned in. So there's a static furniture box multi. Now you only need to put things into your map group pos that would normally spawn stuff in. So for example, the drill doesn't spawn stuff in near it, does it? But what does do is the tent. So we're just going to take this entry here for this tent, and we're just going to copy that, and we're going to go to our map group pos, and we're just going to paste it in there. Now I would be tempted as well to put a comment next to this. So left triangle, angle bracket, exclamation mark, dash dash, custom tent at northeast airfield dash dash right spiky bracket, whatever it's called. That's just so that we can remember that the reason why this entry is in our map group pos is because it's a custom thing. And that can be important when you come to update your server. You know, when we we just had the update to 1.8. Well, if you're reinstalling vanilla files, which you may well want to, because the game, for example, 1.7, more areas are added, which meant that there was more changes to the map group pos file. You'll want to copy these out and then paste them into the new file. So by having that there, that means now, fingers crossed, if there's something to spawn in at that tent, it will spawn in. So that tent will be treated as a part of the map like any other genuine vanilla part. So let's make sure that's saved. Make sure we've got all the files saved. Okay, so that's all saved. We've uploaded everything. Let's just make sure we've got our CFG gameplay. It's done. Okay, so what we want to do now is to make sure we haven't done anything wrong. We want to validate the JSON. So what we want to do is here. So paste in here or drop a file. So let's go to our DayZ. Let's go to custom, northeast airfield tent. Drop that in there, process it. So that's valid. So that's cool. And then the other one we mucked around with was the map group pos, wasn't it? So now we can go choose file, common, DayZ server, missions, generous plus, map group pos, validate. No errors are found. So fingers crossed we've done everything right so far. So what we need to do now is just start my local server. So what you would be doing on the web, you would have uploaded your items to your server, and you would restart your server. So I need to start on my local server now just so we can see if it worked. So start zombie generous. That will start pretty quick. Go back into DayZ. Go to servers. Go to local area network. Just refresh that. See if it pops up. Click join. Set up these, and then we just wait. Now what there should be here now on my local server is there should be the maze I've got out of containers, and there should be this new area that's spawned in. So remember, this is a live video, no editing. So if there's been a mistake, then I wouldn't be surprised, because I haven't tested anything in advance. Here we go, 10 seconds. In we go. Where are we? So here we go. So there's the maze that we talked about earlier, and this is the tent. So let's just go inside and see if anything spawned in. So the gun spawned in as normal, but we were expecting that. So nothing spawned in yet. But remember, it takes time for objects to spawn in the central economy, and things won't spawn in when you're there. So you can see how these little things have added that little depth of immersion, because before it was dead easy to spawn in the tent, and actually it was quite easy to spawn in those wheels. But all this other stuff you just couldn't do on console. But now, for some reason, there's a gym hobby horse there. You can imagine what you can do with these, this base, pallets, and then you know, for we've got the periodic table in our military tent, and we could here we go. So so there's a mistake, isn't there? So for some reason I moved the coordinates of the drill over, so we'd have to go back in and double check that. But there we go. So my friends, that is how you can use the new static items to create custom locations, custom props for your community server on PlayStation, Xbox and PC. In fact, look, yeah, I've made a bit of a cock up here, because look, that flag isn't attached to the tent, so I need to go back and check things and just adjust things slightly. Right, so there we go. If you found the video useful, hit like. If you want to see more of the same, press subscribe, and I will of course see you again soon.